Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers, where we are going to be taking a look at a bunch of video games with a pirate theme, because I asked you to vote on my next video and this is what you chose, so if you don't like it, you only have yourself to blame. Pirates are cool, we all know that, and video games are a perfect opportunity to get yourself into some scurvy-ridden adventures. But enough of this pointless intro to pad things out. As I had a bit more time to make this one, thanks to being sick, we have loads of games to get through, so I'll keep the waffle a bit shorter. Anyway, it's time for me to shut up, for you to press that subscribe button, and we'll take a look at some games. We are starting with Pirate Pete for the arcade. This is a really simple arcade game where you are Pirate Pete, and your pirate princess has been kidnapped and taken to an island by cannibals who want to eat her juicy bits. I know, in a video game, scandalous. Pirate Pete is having none of this though, and he goes to get her back through a handful of levels. You start on your pirate ship where you have to swing from rope to rope across your galleon. You'll need to time your button presses well to make sure you don't fall and break your neck. Eventually you get to the end of the ship and into the sea where you have to swim to shore while avoiding deadly sharks. You need to come up for air so you don't drown as well, and you've got a knife that you can use to stab sharks in the face, but it's got a crappy range, so I'd recommend just avoiding them altogether. Make it to shore and you'll be running up that hill like Kate Bush, avoiding all sorts of rocks. Make it to the top and you'll see your lovely lady being dangled over a pot and being slowly lowered in. Jump over the cannibals and get her back. Now, I unironically really enjoy this game. The controls are great, the premise is daft, and the mixture of levels is really good. It's one that you can beat in about 5 minutes, but it just loops, getting faster and faster each time like lots of classic arcade games do. The graphics are charming and it's just fun to play, and yep, it is basically a palette swap of Jungle Hunt, which is also good fun. This one is genuinely highly recommended. Captain Silver for the Master System is a port of the arcade where you play as a pirate who loves nothing more than collecting letters that spell out his own name. Sounds like the kind of thing Kanye West would do. Annoyingly, the entire world have come along and stolen your letters, so you go through a bunch of levels from towns and caves and ships where you need to murder everyone you see. Pretty much everyone you kill will drop one of the letters, filling up the name bar at the top of the screen. Once it's full, you go to the next level. Stages won't end until you've collected all your letters. You attack with a sword, which is pretty good to use. There's fairies for some reason. When these appear, grab one and you'll shoot stars from your sword. Collect another one and you'll even shoot more stars. You also get money when you collect the letters, and there's shops in the levels where you can buy fairies, boots that make you faster and jump higher, and a magic potion, but I actually never bought that, so I don't actually know what it does. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed playing this one. It doesn't look particularly good with some very basic and flickery graphics, and the one-hit deaths are quite annoying. You'll need to do a fair bit of climbing to get around, and it's easy to be killed when you're climbing the rigging, but I did want to keep trying. It's not a very long game though, and you do also get bosses, which are actually pretty fun to fight. Overall, I would actually recommend giving this one a go. It doesn't look great, but it is fun to play. Pirates of Dark Water is based on the TV series of the same name. I've never watched it, but I've been told it was pretty popular back in the day. This is the SNES version from Sunsoft, and it's a beat 'em up in the style of games like Final Fight or Streets of Rage. You get to choose from 3 characters which have the usual stats of being fast and weak, slow and strong, and the all-rounder. This one plays like your typical beat 'em up. You walk forward, the screen stops, a bunch of enemies appear, you beat them up and repeat. You have your standard combo by hammering a button, but you also have a second attack button that does a more powerful attack. You can grab enemies and throw them as well, and do a special that hits everyone around you, but does some damage to you. There's not a massive variety in enemies, and although you do have 1 or 2 new ones added in throughout the game, for the most part you're fighting the same 3 or 4 enemy types over and over again. And this is a bit of a problem here, as the levels do seem to go on forever, and this one really does get boring quite fast. They do try to mix things up with traps and things in all the levels, and of course new bosses, but I really found that everything here just dragged on. It doesn't help that enemies also take forever to kill, even with the strongest character. It just feels tedious. It's not even particularly difficult, and you'll likely just zone out and hammer the attack button without much thought here. The game looks alright, pretty standard for this type of game, but it is just boring and tedious to play, and I really probably wouldn't recommend it. Interestingly, the Mega Drive or Genesis version is totally different, this time being a pure side-scrolling platform game. Once again, you choose to play as any of the 3 main characters, and something I really like is that you can choose between them all at the start of every level. They each have their own play styles, attacks and speeds, etc, so it makes a difference on how you play the levels depending on who you choose, and there's even different routes through the levels for each character. The levels are large open affairs, and this is one of those games where you just have to explore everywhere until you find a certain item that lets you exit the level. There's little to no direction given, so it can be a pain at times, but usually you will find where you need to get to without too much trouble. You have to be careful though, as enemies and traps are everywhere and they will respawn. But each character has a few combos you can use and even a projectile weapon, which is powerful but limited in number. You can also take full damage here, which took me a while to get used to. The game looks great though, with some excellent sprites and some really good animation. The levels are very varied and fun to explore, and you can choose to go wherever you want, rather than the levels all being linear. You will need to revisit old levels with new items to get to certain areas as well. This is definitely a much better game than the Super Nintendo version, and even as someone who doesn't care about the TV show, I would definitely recommend it to anyone that likes exciting platform adventures. The Secret of Monkey Island is a fantastic point-and-click adventure game, and possibly my favourite in the genre. It's either this or Day of the Tentacle. This is the remastered version here, and I'm playing it on the Xbox 360 because I'm edgy. You are Guybrush Threepwood, a man on a mission to become a mighty pirate. You meet some pirate leaders who tell you about the 3 trials that you have to complete to become a pirate, so that's what you need to do. Explore Melee Island, which is full of pirates, deadbeats and sexy governors. Being a point-and-click adventure, you have to point your cursor everywhere and talk to everyone you meet and pick up items that the games let you grab. Talking to people will usually give you clues on what you need to do, but also it's just fun to do as the game has a great sense of humour and a fantastic script. Eventually you make your way to the mystical Monkey Island, where you hear a huge treasure is hidden, and there may or may not be an evil pirate after it as well. Solving puzzles is never simple in this game, and the whole thing is deliberately wacky and obscure. You'll have to combine random items to make crazy contraptions, and most puzzles have more of a comedy element to them than a logical one. You've got to think outside the box here. This remastered version features some great hand-drawn artwork and animation, and is fully voiced. The game also is on a bunch of old computers, where it's all in VGA graphics and purely text, though later revisions did add voices. I had the CD version for DOS back in the day. Go me. I can't recommend this game highly enough. Obviously the PC version is the preferred way to play for best controls, but you can't really go wrong with any of them. A must play.
Ahoy there, fancy pants.
Monkey Island 2 LeChuck's Revenge is the sequel to Monkey Island, and Guybrush is now a legendary pirate, but still an idiot. You defeated an evil pirate in the first game, and now you want to get to the legendary treasure, Big Whoop. But said evil pirate, LeChuck, is back for revenge and now a zombie to boot. This game is basically identical to play as the first one, but is still a fantastic adventure filled with tough puzzles, great graphics and some really great writing. Oh, and I really have to mention, the music for the Monkey Island games is fantastic, and if you can find it on Spotify, definitely listen to it. What I like about these remasters is that you can switch between the old and new graphics at any point with the press of a button, which is a really nice touch, so you can really see the upgrades that were made. Not really much more to say about this one, as it's the same but different, but I mean that in a nice way. Either way, it's one that you really need to play. In fact, that just applies to any Monkey Island game. They are all really good. Play them. Here is Captain Havoc for the Sega Mega Drive, or High Seas Havoc for the Genesis if you're the kind of person that likes being felt up by a genie. Check out the Secret Levels podcast for more information on that. Here you play as Captain Havoc, who is a seal, because this is a 90s 16-bit game and everyone has to be an animal. This is a pretty cool action platform game that takes more than a little inspiration from games like Sonic and Mario, but does them well enough. An evil walrus named Bernardo has stolen your mate, so you've got to go and kick his ass to get her back. And yeah, Bernardo does have more than a passing resemblance to a certain Koopa King. Havoc will need to explore some pirate-themed levels, so you get a bunch of ships, caves, islands, underwater lagoons and treasure troves, and you've got to get Bridget back. You'll be running and jumping on enemies to defeat them, but you also have a spin kick you can do. This is quite hard to get used to, but can be handy for killing enemies that are just high enough that you can't land on their heads. There's plenty of tricky platforming to be had here, and the game is definitely much harder than I was expecting, but it's not unfair. You can collect diamonds, and 100 of them will give you an extra life, and you get a few continues as well. It looks great with some really bright and colourful graphics, and the levels all look really cool, and there's some decent animation on just about anything, and I love decent animation on 16-bit games. If you're a fan of platform games, this one is a really good one to play. Now, we can't have a video about pirate games and not mention Pirates of the Caribbean, which has loads of games to choose from, but are they any good? Well, we're going to have a look at some of them. This is Pirates of the Caribbean for the Xbox, surprisingly made by Bethesda. This is an action RPG, which I didn't really expect, and sadly it's just set in the universe and has nothing to do with the movies, though I suppose that could have a lot of potential. I didn't see any of the characters, but I wouldn't be surprised if they make a cameo appearance at some point. You play as some boring generic pirate guy, and there isn't much of a story at the start, as that all depends on what you do and how you play. But the first thing you need to do is get yourself a crew so you can set sail and find some treasure, and no doubt have some swashbuckling adventures along the way. Now, I'll be straight with you, I really couldn't get into this game. It looks decent enough, and even on the Xbox here the controls weren't too bad, but it did take so long to get going that I got quite bored with it quite quickly and really had to force myself to keep playing. The game is also quite in-depth with its RPG mechanics, which isn't really my scene. You'll visit towns where you can buy and sell goods, and trading seems like it'll be a large part of the game, and the main way you'll get money to pay your crew, feed them, and of course buy all the weapons and gear you need to go on your adventure. There's a load of characters all over the place to interact with, and you'll need to fight them now and then as well. I didn't have too many fights here, but they were actually pretty clunky and not all that much fun. You do get to explore quite a large open world filled with islands, which is cool, and you'll be able to find different things to buy and sell at different places. There's also battles at sea. These are very hard to begin with though, so you definitely need to spend time getting your ship up to speed. And I think that's the main problem for me with this game. It's one that you really need to have a fair bit of time to get used to all the mechanics if you want to get anywhere. I have heard that there's quite a few people that really like this game, but it's just not really for me. It's also on the PC, which is probably the best way to play it. The Xbox version was fine, but a little clunky. It does have a fair few frame rate issues as well, though it is a Bethesda game, so you should expect a few bugs. Maybe give it a go if it looks interesting to you, it just wasn't for me. Here is Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest for the Game Boy Advance, which I believe is the second movie, I forget. This is actually based directly from the movie this time, and you play as a few characters depending on the level that you're playing. It's a side-scrolling action game for the most part, where you'll be exploring a few locations from the movies. You can run around and jump, and you'll use your sword fighting skills to take on loads of enemies in the levels. All the levels are reasonably short, but just enough to keep your interest, and they're actually quite well designed, and thank goodness they aren't those where the hell do I need to go sort of levels. Fighting enemies is easy and fun, and what's cool is that as you play, you'll find hidden treasure in the levels. Some just give you points and are collectibles, others actually give you new abilities like being able to double jump or even new attacks that are really powerful. Most of the treasures are optional, but you will want to find them so you can get all the moves you can. They'll really help you out. You also have times when you're exploring the ocean in your boat, and this is how you go to new levels, giving it sort of an open world feel. What's cool is that you do fight other boats in the seas, and then when you've done enough damage, you've got the option to either board them and steal any treasure, which is usually things like new moves or an increase to your life bar, or if you can't be bothered, you can just sink the ship and be done with it. This is fun to do and a nice way to break up the gameplay. And I do have to say, I was really surprised at how fun this game is. I mean, it's still clearly a bit of a rush license job, but it plays well enough. The graphics are those pre-rendered ones that the Game Boy Advance was filled with, but they're smooth and it doesn't look bad. The animation is decent. Overall, this is actually a fun game that is worth a playthrough. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End for the Xbox 360 is pretty much what you'd expect from a licensed game of the time. It's actually not bad, but it's about as generic and formulaic as you can get. It's a third-person action game that actually closely follows the plot of the film through a bunch of levels and set pieces. The characters you play as all depend on the level, and you'll go through all of the main ones. And I do have to say, the game looks fantastic. The graphics here are great, the character models look spot on, and the levels are all wildly varied and detailed, and there's rarely any slowdown. Each level is large and tends to give you a few objectives to complete. They are fairly linear, but you will need to do some exploring to solve simple puzzles, mainly finding switches that open doors, or maybe doing something wacky that makes the scenery fall down and create a new path or something along those lines. There's loads of enemies here, and the bulk of the game is combat focused. Sadly, the combat is probably the worst part of the game. It is incredibly simple. You just have one attack button, and as long as you attack an enemy before they attack you, you pretty much always win. There's no real damage indicators when you hit an enemy, which looks strange, and they just sort of die, and it's all a bit janky. Now there are times where you have to break their guard, and you'll also get pistols, knives and other weapons to throw if you really want to go wild. You also have certain finishers. At points in a sword fight, you'll get a button prompt on screen, and if you do it right, you'll get an instant kill. These are absolutely necessary against the zombie fishmen people, as if you don't use these moves, they'll just keep getting back up. Unfortunately, while the game does start out fun, it gets repetitive quite quickly, and the dodgy combat can really make some of the levels a chore to play. But having said that, the awesome graphics can help make some of the levels look pretty damn epic, especially the final few stages on your boat with some crazy storms going on while you're fighting on the rigging. Something that did kind of piss me off though is that I completed this game, but then I realised it's one of those ones that doesn't actually let you go back to replay old levels, which means I can only show you a few of them. But the fact that this game is £2 now means that I would actually recommend getting yourself a copy. It's perfectly middle of the road, but if you like the movies, there's definitely fun to be had. And of course, no good series of movies can escape getting a LEGO adaptation, so here is LEGO Pirates of the Caribbean. This game lets you play through the first 4 films in one awesome retelling of the movies in the classic LEGO style. If you ever played one of the LEGO games, and let's face it, who hasn't, then you know exactly what you're getting here. You play through loads of levels, all based on the movies. The films are divided up into their own games, which you can access through a hub world. As you play, you unlock dozens of characters. Pretty much every character from the film is represented, and they look great and they play great. There's about 5 different character types, and they each have their own set of skills, which are needed to interact with various parts of the world. The levels are deliberately designed for replay value, and there's loads of secrets and hidden items that you'll need to come back with certain character type to access. Once you've beaten a level in story mode, you can go back at any point with any of the characters you've unlocked in free play mode. The levels themselves are all pretty large and they look really good. There's plenty of enemies to fight, and you get loads of destructible things in the levels to smash, which gives you these studs. These are used to buy power-ups and perks that are permanently once you have them, like multipliers, hidden object locators and so on. And you can even buy new characters and even vehicles. It's just so damn addictive. There's loads of puzzles in the game as well, which are never too complicated, and you tend to always have exactly what you need right on screen with you. You have to find items and smash things to build new structures out of LEGO, and as with most of these LEGO games, the way they make the universe work in LEGO is just so damn good, and it works really well, and it's hard to stop playing. Even though it's all LEGO, the game looks great, and the cutscenes are excellent, and often genuinely funny. I'm a fan of pretty much all of the LEGO games. You can't really go wrong with any of them, and this one is no exception. It's one that you'll probably want to 100%, and it's the perfect game to play with a friend, partner or child. Here's one you might not know. It's 1000 Tiny Claws for the PlayStation 3 and PSP, and it was a download only title. Here you play as sexy pirate lady Rana, who's a sky pirate. It's basically a wave attack game, split over 5 worlds, each of which has a handful of levels. You have the job of defending the sky worlds from bug-like creatures, which I guess have a total of 1000 tiny claws. Enemies will spawn in waves, and as you play more and more, different enemy types will appear. Some just run at you, some fire stuff, some explode, and so on. You've got a sword to fight them with, and you can do a few combos and attacks. The idea is just to knock them all off of the screen. Get rid of them all, and you win the level. Eventually you'll fight a boss, which are massive and have to be killed the traditional way. You usually have certain weaknesses that you need to exploit. You build up a bar as you kill stuff, and then by holding the square button you do a massive special attack that knocks off most enemies from the screen in just one hit. It's a pretty short game that can be beaten in a couple of hours, but that's kind of the point. It's billed as a PS mini game, which makes sense. But it does have replay value as you get scored for your performance, though there's not really much in the way of unlockables, which I thought there would be. But this is still a fun little title. I'm not sure if and how you get it if you don't already have it these days, but I'm sure there's a way. It's a decent way to kill a couple of hours. Age of Booty is another PS3 downloadable title that I'm pretty sure was available on a few systems, but I'm too lazy to check. This is from Capcom, and it's a cool strategy game. It's not a crazy in-depth one though, it's more arcadey. It's one that you can basically pick up and play, and more importantly, enjoy. You are the captain of a ship, and you have a boat, Shock. You control just the boat in the world made up of hexagons. There's islands everywhere, as well as other boats, and more importantly, a variety of bases and ports. Your objective is on every level to take control of a certain number of these ports, but it's also the objectives of your opponents, of which there can be up to 3 at a time. So what you need to do is sail the waters where you'll find random crate drops. You want to collect these as they contain either money, wood or rum. As well as this, you see the ports, which also have the symbol of money, wood or rum. These ports are small and you can sail over to them and blast them with your cannons, but beware, they will fire back. If you destroy them, you'll get whatever resource they have the symbol for. And then there's the big bases. These bases are much tougher and they have much higher defense and attack. You do have flags that tell you how tough they are. The more flags, the more dangerous. But you also have a flag indicator on your ship. You can use the resources you've earned to upgrade your ship back at your base. You can increase your attack, defense and speed. Essentially, the game is a race to upgrade your boat, and so you're tough enough to take over the bases. Enemy ships will be doing the same thing though, so you'll also need to fight them and sink them as often as you can so you can steal their supplies and stop them from upgrading their ships. When you hold a base, you can also upgrade its stats to make it harder for the opponent to steal it from you, which they'll really want to do. Capture enough bases and you win and move on to the next level, which is the same but on a different map. It's a really simple game, but a hell of a lot of fun. The levels can get crazy and range from taking 10 minutes to beat to more than an hour as the game goes back and forth, but they're always really addictive, and I found this one hard to put down. It's got that just one more try quality to it. Definitely recommended if it exists anywhere anymore. Assassin's Creed Black Flag is probably a game I'd get lynched for if I didn't include it, so here you go. Big disclaimer at the start, I'm not really a massive fan of the Assassin's Creed games. I find them kind of repetitive. The parkour isn't really all that good. But I do have to say, of all the ones I've completed, and I have completed the first 3 and Assassin's Creed Rogue, this is definitely my favourite one. It's got an overly serious story, despite the ridiculous premise of you being a person from the future being transported into the memories of an ancestor who happened to be awesome pirates. Though, let's be honest, if it was possible, this would be a really cool thing to do. So you're playing through the story of pirate Edward Kenway, who's really good at murdering people, and you have to stop bad pirates and dodgy English people from doing their shady dealings. It's all very serious, but the gameplay here is really damn fun. You spend half your time exploring hundreds of islands in a massive open world. Islands range in size and some are tiny, but they always hold treasure for you to find and items to collect. Exploring them is always fun, and although the parkour is still a bit clunky if you ask me, it works well enough and is fun to do. Often you'll find enemy bases that you can overrun. Being an assassin, there is a massive focus on stealth, but you can also just go in swords blazing a lot of the time and do quite well. The stealth combat is very fun though. You can hide in all sorts of places, and killing people from your hiding place or from jumping on them from above is easy and seamless. You can hide bodies, and sneaking around is great. When you're in a sword fight, there's a few moves you can do to attack, parry and stun enemies. It's almost like a very basic Arkham Asylum combat system, but it works. When you're not stabbing people in the back, you'll be sailing the seas, and this is really fun, and you're often given a fair amount of freedom between missions. You'll get into loads of boat fights, and these are really well done. Controlling your ship isn't realistic, but it's for the best, though to be fair, I've never sailed a pirate ship, so it might be very realistic. You have a ton of weapons, and you can upgrade your boat with all the money and treasure that you've plundered. One problem I have with the game is that the menu and upgrade system are just crap, and so over-designed that they're not user-friendly at all. You will learn how they work, but for the first few hours of the game they were just a confusing mess. I find this a lot in modern games. The menus and systems are really poorly designed, and yes, you can of course use real money to buy upgrades if you're an idiot. Bad form Ubisoft, bad form. But yeah, this game is still a lot of fun. If you've never played an Assassin's Creed game, I'd say don't bother with the other ones, just go straight to this one. I hear the new ones are meant to be very good, but I just don't really care.
Keep your backs together, lads. This fight ain't over.
Hands up, who's heard of Captain Morgaine and the Golden Turtle? Yeah, didn't think so. This is another point-and-click adventure game where you play as Morgaine, a pirate wannabe who ends up on an adventure to find a golden turtle. Yeah. This is mainly aimed at a younger audience, to be fair, and is very much a budget title, which you can really tell from the use of the most generic stock sound effects and its overall graphical style, which looks like one of those hidden object point-and-click games. Anyway, as Morgaine, you spend the first hour or so of this game doing exciting things like dusting your house, cleaning windows, fetching water, and other riveting household chores that pirates are known for. Not entirely sure why games developers think it's a good idea to start a game this way, but oh well.
No one will really
When
be
you've done
your
that, you go meet your friends and things do get a bit more interesting, but not really any more fun. This is your usual point and click thing, which isn't really a bad thing, as I do like the way that they play. It's just that this one is very boring, and I can't imagine even younger people being particularly interested in it, as it's so slow to get going and drags on. You do have to explore locations looking for items to solve puzzles, and you'll be talking to loads of people along the way who will give advice and help you figure out what you need to do. But again, it's just never very interesting. I'd say don't bother with this one, especially when you could just play Monkey Island. Here is Galleon for the original Xbox. You play as the stupidly named Raymer, an awesome pirate man that is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. You are contacted by some mystical bloke who studies weird stuff, who's found a mystical galleon that seems to be magical somehow. He gets you along to have a look, as you know everything about the boats and the world, and while investigating, you're attacked by the scientist bloke's friend who kills him and steals the boat. Thankfully, the scientist had a sexy daughter, so the two of you go on an adventure to get the boat back and kill everyone else. Now this is a weird ass game, and it would take hours to explain how it all works. For the most part, the game is divided into a load of pretty large levels that require a lot of exploration and puzzle solving, as well as a lot of combat. Now, the game was created and designed by the bloke that created the Tomb Raider games, which will give you a bit of an idea on how it might work. You get huge open levels with a ton of platforming, and you'll need to find switches and solve puzzles to open new areas. You've got a few weapons to fight with. You can just use your fists or one of a few swords that you find on your adventure. As you meet new characters, sometimes they'll join you in your journey and they might help in combat either by fighting with you or providing assistance like being able to heal you. The thing is, with all this though, is that the game uses a completely unique control system that when it works is great, but it works about 45% of the time. Essentially, your character only moves forwards. You tell him when to move forwards, but then you just control the camera and he runs whichever way the camera is pointing, which kind of sounds normal, but it's not. It's hard to explain. You do have a jump button for large jumps, but anything else will see him automatically climbing, stepping or vaulting over. Again, it kind of works, but not really. And the combat, well, I have to say I really hate the combat here. It is crappy at best, and fighting just one regular enemy is needlessly difficult. It has some good ideas, like new moves being available depending on how well you're doing in a particular fight, and you get on-screen prompts showing you how to do these moves when you can, but enemies often ignore your blows and can kill you very easily. And the checkpoint system is very annoying here, and usually always before a needlessly long unskippable cutscene, so you end up watching that dozens of times. But the thing is, the fact that the game really does try to do so much stuff that's unique makes me actually quite enjoy playing it. I do get frustrated with it, and there's times where I've had to take a break and come back to it later, but the story's good and the exploration parts are often really good fun, though also quite janky. Doing anything precise in this game is almost impossible. But I am having a really good time playing the game. I know full well that there'll be people out there that hate it, but if you can handle it, there is fun to be had. I will say that I really hate the character designs here though. They're ugly as hell. And this is the guy that created Tomb Raider. Well, I don't think he's ever seen a real woman in his life with how he depicts them. But yeah, if you want something that's quite original, then give this a go. But be warned that it's not smooth sailing. Hey, I've got a pirate reference in there. And finally for this long ass video, here is Zack and Wiki quest for Barabos treasure for the exciting Nintendo Wii video game system. This is a really cool puzzle game where you play as Zack, a pirate, and you have a cat monkey thing called Wiki who can also turn into a bell for some reason. There's a story about treasure here, so basically you want to get the treasure. But like all treasure worth having, almost all of it is guarded by all manner of crazy tricks and traps and people and monsters and things. The game is controlled exclusively with the Wii Remote. You point at stuff and press on it to interact with it. Depending on what it is, you'll need to use the Wii Remote in the correct way to do what you need to do. So pulling levers, pressing buttons, swinging a sword, all use actions that you kind of would in real life. You get an indicator on screen showing you what you need to do as well. The puzzles here range from quite simple to downright devious, but they're always really fun to figure out and I really enjoy playing this one. There are animals in the game and you can actually be killed, but if you lose all of your lives, it just means you restart the puzzle. In fact, a lot of the puzzles will require trial and error, and there's plenty of instant death situations that you just won't know about the first time you play. but generally these aren't annoying, even though there's a few unskippable cutscenes. You do get points for how quickly you solve the puzzles and how many tries it takes you, and these unlock various things as you play, but nothing that's needed to beat the game. If you're near one of the animals I mentioned and you shake the Wii remote, Wiki will start ringing like a bell and transforms the animal into an object you can use. This is a cool mechanic and will be required to solve most puzzles. Ringing the bell again turns it back to its animal form, and this is sometimes needed as it might be an animal that can scare off a different enemy. There's no combat here, it's all about puzzle solving. And the puzzles are just one screen as well, so you don't need to do loads of exploring, just the small stage that you're in, but they managed to pack a ton in here. Graphically it looks excellent with some cel shaded graphics, and the animation is really good as well, though I do think that Zack walks like he's shit himself most of the time. But still, it's a great looking game and a great playing game that I highly recommend to anyone. So there you go, every single game ever made based on pirates. If you think there are some that I haven't included, which is ridiculous, then you're a scurvy sea rat, but be sure to comment below and let me know which ones could be included if I ever do a part 2 of this subject. But for now, as always, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.